A big welcome back to the Nick Elston Show, Season 6, Episode 5. Firstly, thank you so much for your engagement on last week's episode. Rich Jones, who went from the military to drug dealing to prison, powerful story. I love bringing you fascinating people with fascinating stories and rich backgrounds. And today is nothing different to that at all. Today we have all the way from the US of A, is Dr. Patty-Ann. Woo!
So great to be here, Nick. Thank you. Thank you. How you doing across the pond over there?
Well, we're good. We have snow here today, but it's not by the US stretch of snow. It's not kind of like this. It's kind of like this. But everything's
Okay. Everything, exactly.
And
how's everything going for you?
Very good, thank you. I was trawling through LinkedIn just before, as we were just chatting about, and just to kind of get some background on your experiences and specialisms, that kind of stuff. Because despite appearances, I do actually do a little bit of work behind the scenes, just a little bit. And wow, huge wealth of experience. But also, as we're recording this today, International Women's Day, that's a sector, that's a part of walk of life that you really do focus a lot of your attention on. So really glad we're chatting to you today above any other day as well. So Dr. Patty-Ann, less from me, more from you. Tell us who you are, what you do, where you're from. Think quiz show.
All right. Well, thanks. Thank you so much. I am really excited to be here, and thank you to all the listeners for giving me their most precious commodity, their time. Right. So basically, what I am is a very passionate wife, mother, friend, colleague, and professional. So in the States, most people say, what do you do? And they talk about their work, right? Not so much over in the UK or even the rest of the world. But I really like to emphasize the human aspect of who I am. And being a professional is just a part of that, right? So basically, I have the alphabet soup of degrees, right? Which basically it's, the BS, which is BS, right? The MS, which is more S, and the PhD piled high and deep, right? But basically, I really love
that. That's so cool.
I basically love education. I love learning, right? And all of my formal education was really just the start. It really helps make me a relationship expert, a human development, human behavior, human motivation expert, right? Because my education is all different aspects of the person, as opposed to coaches that just study a little bit or are just great at it innately, right? And so I started out as a traditional clinical psychologist, and I was doing a lot of work with couples, very high-powered entrepreneurial and corporate couples and corporate relationships. And one of the CEOs, I was working with him and his wife, and we were working on communication. And his wife said, Bill or Bob, this is what your company needs. And he looked at me and he said, can you do this for my executive team? And I was like, I don't know, I'm a psychologist, And I said, so that was the start of what I did. Was then I went back, because really my formal education was just the groundwork, right? It was a great start, but there was so much more to learn. And then I got coaching certifications, and I really delved into the coaching world. And quite frankly, there's been no stop, there's been no looking back. And the reason why I love coaching over being a psychologist / therapist is because that's more, this is just my opinion, and it's needed. But for me, it's, psychology therapy is more of a pathology model, right? I love coaching because it's a health and a looking forward model. But I'll be honest, all of that education absolutely helped me be what I think is the best coach that I can be. And I'm always learning. I'm incorporating a lot of neuroscience into my work now. So basically what I do is I own a boutique coaching and consulting firm where it's relationship skills that drive the bottom line. And what I do is I work with both corporate and entrepreneur, which is a little unusual. And I'll work with executive teams. I'll work with leadership teams. And it doesn't matter, Nick, what your business is, because I work on the people part. So it's 80% of the work is people getting along, not getting along. And the overarching concept is creating and building and restoring trust. And part of that is teaching emotional intelligence, communication, how to have the difficult conversations. And I love it. And I can really make an impact. And then as an offshoot to that, staying true to my roots, I will work with intimate couples only if at least one of the two people are entrepreneurs, and or if there's an intimate couple in business together with their own company. And that's what I do. I've written 2 best-selling books. I speak around the world like you do. And I'm really the luckiest person on the planet because I love everything I do. I love being on podcasts. I have my own podcast, Dr. Patty-Ann's podcast, very creative. And I'm just really lucky. Do a lot of TV, radio, all that good stuff.
Love that. That's so cool.
Did I bore you to tears?
I knew this would happen. There's so many rabbit holes I want to dive down now. So I'm going to be really mindful of certainly time, as you said, the most precious commodity, but making sure we get everything in. So I guess the first kind of rabbit hole that I wanted to dive down, because I want to get to your personal story behind the you that everybody sees, a very visible character. Like I said, I knew of you before I knew you, and our first conversation, obviously through LinkedIn and the power of being networked and stuff. And so I guess that working with people, say on an executive level and an intimate level, would you say the main differences in working in those different environments? Because I know that this is kind of in-running joke, I guess, with some of the elements around in the UK, that you can get amazing advice on a professional level, but if your partner told you that same advice, the context is different, so you don't really buy into it. Do you find actually with a bit of professional distance, it's easier to put your goodness onto them?
Okay, well, it's similar to what you said. It's a great question. It's similar to what you said about with your kids, right? If somebody else tells your kids something, it's great. Meanwhile, as a parent, you're like, I've been telling you that for 20 years. And, but and also the food in other people's house tastes better too. It's hysterical. So the difference, right? The difference between, I think if I'm hearing you correctly, executive coaching for executives and leadership, and coaching when you have intimate partners, right? Is that with the entrepreneurial intimate partners, they are truly equal. And it's interesting because I'm writing a book now, they're a business partnership. They're aligned, they have the same goals, they have the same values, all of that. In the corporate level, no matter how much crap they say that we are a family, you are not a family, because when someone in your family doesn't do what you want, you don't fire them. Although we might want to, you usually don't, right? You might be a team, but even with the team, you have a owner, you have a coach, you have a manager, you have a captain, right? There's a hierarchy, there's a pecking order. And that rings true in the executive world. So in the executive world, I have to be very mindful when I'm coaching people. And I am very much, in spite of all my education, I am a mother of 4 children, married for many decades. You don't get that there without being a realist, right? There's the theory and then there's life, right? So I very much coach according to the realities of the corporate world. And, I have to help people grow and develop within the culture that they're working. So even if the CEO is wrong in corporate now, you have to assess, what's the value, what's the benefit to you? Are you better off having the difficult conversation, or are you better off realizing, as is true in all businesses, that at some point, an executive decision has to be made at the highest level. And it might be different than what you think it should be. But this is where you can't take it personally, right? And this is where women, by the way, differentiate from men. Women tend to hear no to a business idea as a personal rejection, whereas men are like, I think you're an idiot, but whatever, and then it's, you have to still be all hands in. whether it's your idea or not, and realize it's not about you, but a decision is made, and maybe people above you have information. Many times I have information that you don't have. So the coaching at the executive level and corporate, why it's about personal development, it cannot rock the boat too much, right? Because all change comes with discomfort, but you can't rock the boat too much where you get the executive thrown out of the company. That's just counterproductive. And I've seen that, right? You can't go in there with all guns blazing, my way or the highway, because guess what? You'll be the one on the highway.
I mean, we've spoken about and thank you for that. I love the way that you very visual messaging that you deliver. I love that. It's really cool for me. We're talking about the things that are different. What about in terms of alignment? That there was, I was at a personal development event in London years ago, and I heard somebody use this phrase: couples that go together grow together. So very often you'll see this disconnect between whether it's level of aspiration or ambition. And I guess you can see this in a personal or a professional context. How difficult is that to navigate when you have two mindsets working as a unit?
Well, it's okay. You know what? It's not difficult as long as I'm actually writing a part of a book now, 7 pitfalls to avoid when entering an entrepreneurial relationship, right? Because it's very much like a marriage. There's a lot of commonality there. The key is you have to have trust at the core. And trust can prevail through a difference of opinion. What you must have, and you have to constantly check in with your partner on this, is that you must be aligned with the vision for the company. How you get there, there's a million ways to skin a cat, right? How you get there might be different, but you have to make sure that your North Star stays the same. And then you can work through everything else.
Fascinating stuff. I mean, we talk about trust is an interesting one, actually, because I guess it's one of those things that, like you, like everybody, we've often had our trust misplaced or taken advantage of.
Sure.
It's easy to say when you feel resilient that I refuse to trust and to stop trusting people, but very often people can get held back by being hurt before in that situation, can't they? How is it possible to move on through trust issues to get to the you that you want to be?
Okay, so I'm really glad that you asked me that question, because a lot of the work that I do in business partnerships, this is also a CEO and a COO, and certainly with entrepreneurs, is that the trust does get damaged. And I have to come in and repair that trust. All right. There's several ways to do this. First, let me define what I mean by trust. And it's not my definition. It's Stephen M.R. Covey, the son of Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's his son's definition that there's smart trust, right? You don't want to just trust any yin yang on the planet, right? You have to use your brain, right? So you want,
as we said, I love your style.
Listen, I'm just a kid from Brooklyn that, went to school a lot, right? And the smart trust encompasses two concepts. One is competency and one is character. So if I'm going to bring you into my business organization or work with you, the first thing I need to assess for is, do you have the competency? And quite frankly, that's easy. That's easy. The one that's more difficult, and the one that people often forget to assess, is, do they have the character that I want? And many times I'll work with an entrepreneur and they're vetting different people, and I am part of the process, because even though Lord knows I'm not cheap, it is so much better to make the right decision than the cost of the wrong decision, financially and emotionally. And so the character is, are you aligned in the character? Are they trustworthy? Are they honest? Do you share the work ethic, right? All of the things that we think, do you have integrity, right? Honesty, all of the things that we would want to bring into our company so that we don't have to worry about having a character issue knocking on our door.
Mm.
And that can bring down a company. So if you look about, I don't want to get political, but if you look around the last 5 years, maybe decade, and what's brought down or exited a lot of companies, it's not necessarily the business aspect, but it is the character of the person that compromised the business. Right? So
Yeah.
you really have to remember that, right? So there's that. So first we have to say, okay, what do we mean by trust, right? Let's use our head. Now, have we been burnt? If you're breathing for more than, 5 years, you've been burnt by somebody, right? If you're living your life, but you can't allow your past to define your future. What you have to do, and this is a lot of the work that I do, right? There's no such thing as a one-handed clap. So if you were burnt by somebody, right, you're not going to change their character. You are not. Let me be very clear. You're not going to change their character. But what you want to do, Nick, is you want to look at, okay, how have I contributed to the mistrust? Was there something I missed? Was there something I did? Did I not have full transparency? Okay. So there's that piece. So that leads us to 3 key ways to improve or repair trust. One is take whatever personal responsibility you have for the breach of trust, even if it's only 5%. No such thing as a one-handed clap, as I said earlier, because if you think that you're going to repair trust with the partner in any relationship by blaming them 100% for the trust being broken, you're waiting for Godot. Good luck for you. Not going to happen. It's just against human nature, right? So you have to acknowledge your role in the breakdown of the trust. The second aspect that's very important is consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there's more than one truth. And what I mean by that is business partners in particular, and in romantic relationships, we get so ingrained in our truth is the only truth and that it's a zero-sum game and if I'm 100% right, that means you're 100% wrong. You see how this overlaps from earlier, right? So if I'm right and you're completely wrong, we're never going to move. We're never going to breach that. We're never going to repair that trust. So the example that I give, gosh, I didn't know we were going to go here, is I show a beach ball, right? And if a beach ball has 16 colors, but if I hold a beach ball horizontally, if I asked you the colors you would see, they'd be very different than the colors that I would see.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And right. Based upon your perception, where you're standing, and your life experience, that is your truth, and you are right. But from where I'm standing and my perception, that is my truth, and I am right. Now, Nick, stay with me. Look at me. But hang on a second.
I keep making notes because you're putting some good stuff out here.
Yeah, hang on. If now I show you that beach ball from the side, you see all of the 16 colors. So you get a visual example of, wow, I was right and you were right. So there can be more than one truth. Nobody has a patent on it. There's that. I have a whole exercise I do with it. I didn't know we were going to do it. I could have brought the beach ball with me. It's so powerful. And
That's
then but by the time, right? I'm sorry?
That's the matrix stuff going on right there, isn't it? That's kind of like the,
Yeah. And then, so by the time trust is broken down, nobody can, I'm completely right. You're wrong. You're wrong, right? Happens in a marriage too. The last part is, and there's many different aspects to this, emotional intelligence, and the ability to actively listen, being fully engaged, fully present. Because the way most people listen is we listen and not distracted. We listen to wait for the other person to hurry up and shut up so we can say what we want to say. We listen to point out their mistakes. And then we listen to, so that we can come back out and show you how smart we are to say something, right? So we're not actively, presently engaged to hear them. Stephen Covey, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And when I help you do that, and you are the only one that can change their behavior, but what that will do is when your behavior changes, just like in chemistry, you change one little formula in the equation and you change what you create. So if I change how I behave to you, you will react and respond to me differently as well. And that's how I work on parent trust.
Wow. Boom.
Profile Me is a super shareable mobile application designed to help professionals grow their personal brand. Proudly paperless, this powerful tool packs the power of web, social media, and messaging into one beautifully designed interface that offers a unique and human-centric way to connect and build trust with clients. Easy to share on any platform and easy to save to any phone's home screen. With Profile Me, getting referred has never been easier.
Love that.
Was it make sense? Was it too
absolutely.
complicated?
How you cover such a wide-ranging topic in such clarity like that. Thank you. Look, you also mentioned something else earlier on, which was really fascinating for the space that I work in over here, and it's around kind of mental health and kind of mental illness, well-being kind of stuff. That one of the questions is actually around kind of that coaching versus counselling kind of conversation, and how that kind of reactive versus proactive, that kind of thing. Actually, that can be a barrier for people to reach out for help, knowing that they have to delve back to get forward. How important is it for people to, if they're in a position of adversity in any way, shape, or form, how important is it? Because you've covered both of those, you've worn both of those hats, haven't you? How much do we have to go back to be able to go forward?
Okay, so the truth is, it's like there's an expression that medicine uses: the body has no fences, right? It's all connected. So, I use so much of my psychology background, my social work background, my nursing background, all of that to help my person, right? Because when I'm working with you in real time, that's the history of the sum of your humanity, right? So you can't ignore the past. So what I work with is always, and I tell clients this, we only look backwards in the service of moving forward. If looking back is just beating a dead horse, it's not going to do any good. There's no point in it, right? But if looking back helps us see unhealthy patterns, we might be able to understand a little bit more as to why, but that's not going to mean jack shit in helping you move forward. We have to, this is the pattern. Now, what are you willing to do about it? And it's also, by the way, Nick, why I am not a huge fan of, the Colbys and the Maya Briggs. And it's not that I don't think there's value to them. There is. However, the problem is what people will say is, oh, well, I'm a quick start, so I don't finish things. I'm like, well, guess what? You got to finish a job. You got to finish your homework. You got to finish stuff. But people use it as a barrier from growing and changing. They use it as a protection. And I don't like that. Like, oh, I'm a quick start. I'm like, no, you got to finish your job,
You've alluded to being the girl from Brooklyn. I mean, that's exactly where I want to go before we do bring this to a close. That tell me about.
Oh my gosh, time already?
It's just crazy. Tell me about baby Patty-Ann. Tell me about growing up and education and family life. What did that look like for you, and right through to where we are today? Tell me about your personal journey.
Okay, well, so because we are taping this on International Women's Day, and you brought it up earlier, I have to start the conversation with, I grew up with nothing, meaning no money, nothing, but I grew up with everything, because my mother was the most incredible woman you could have ever met. If I was half the woman she was, I would praise the Lord. And I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of my life. So, I keynote all the time. So I have a lot of stories I could share. So I grew up with, one of 5 children, and what at the time was a traditional home. Like, my father worked, but he worked 3 jobs. My mother stayed at home, took care of us. Fast forward, my mother was widowed at 36 with 5 children. No money. She was an only child, and she had a huge group of friends, but she was really on her own. She was the poster child, Nick, for what welfare was made for. But what did my mother do? Didn't take a dime. She went out and she got a job. And we were like, Mom, like, as an adult, as a kid, what do you know, right? But as an adult, we're like, Mom, from Brooklyn, Mom, why did you take food stamps, welfare, blah, blah, blah? She said, well, why would I? There was nothing wrong with me. I could work. And I'm like, I could give you 5 reasons. Anyway, so got up. She literally walked 15 minutes to the train, subway train, took the train, and then walked across town in Manhattan, where she worked as a secretary at CBS back in the day. Now, let me just timestamp that. My mother was beautiful until the day she died. She could walk into a room and stop a clock. Desperately needed her job, had 5 children, and she was gorgeous in a very male-dominated business. Could you imagine the story she could have told about giving men the Heisman? She never talked about it because she, as you guys would say, she carried on, right? And she worked her way up. But I spent my childhood watching my mother work like a dog, right? And I'm sure having to put up with more crap than we can imagine. But we were raised with really strong values. I'll give you a very quick story. When my mother was on her deathbed, all 5 of us were there, literally on her deathbed. And she looked up at us and she said, when I die and my bills come in, you make sure you pay my bills. And we're like, what? She's like, if a bill comes in, you make sure you pay it. We're like, what are you talking about? She goes, I paid my bills my entire life. You make sure if any bill comes in, you pay it. It was the most, like, she never talked about money, but it was the most bizarre. We're like, okay, it's good. Like, my brother Danny was in charge. Like, Dan, you got that? Did you get the memo? And so, but we were raised with very strong values, and very much education was the be all and end all. Right. And I knew at a young age, there had to be a better way. Like, my mother commuted an hour and a half one way, got up every Saturday morning and cleaned her little railroad place. I'm like, there's got to be a better way. So it's, but this was before reality TV. Right. And I wasn't resentful of the kid that had stuff. I was like, how'd you do that? Like, oh, you went to school. And that's why I have my undergraduate, I have 2 masters, I have a doctorate, I have postgraduate, because I really embrace that. And I'm a diehard American. I know we're not perfect, but I do think we are the greatest country in the world. Got a lot of problems. And if I was born in any other country, I would be in the basement folding someone's laundry. So that's. And then, when I got married, I had twins. I had my 3rd son, and 2 years later. So I had 3 boys, 2 and under. The twins were very sick. They're fine now. And then I had my daughter, and I was like, you know what? No boss on the planet is going to let me raise my family the way I want to and still work. So an entrepreneur was born.
Love that. So cool.
Are you sorry you asked?
Not at all. I'm captivated, and I know that will be the very short version. I know that for sure it's going to be very short. I guess as an aside, something that kind of really comes to me as you're explaining everything that you're about over the past kind of 40 minutes, that how do you recharge? What do you do to actually kind of help yourself kind of recover daily and to make sure that your well-being is in a great place for you to go and help other people? Because I guess that there's a temptation to become that wounded healer that you want to give and give and give so much, but obviously we need to make sure we cover ourselves too.
Okay, so that's interesting. So I'm going to say something really obnoxious, and it's very much because it's the stage of life that I'm at. Like, my children are grown, right? I don't do anything I don't want to do, Nick.
Literally the best answer I've ever had to that question.
Literally, I don't cook. I hate cooking. I don't cook. My husband will cook, or we'll go out. I haven't cleaned in 45 years. I very much use money to buy stress out of my life. Very much. Don't get me wrong. I'm the hardest working person on the planet. I think one of the hardest. But so there's that aspect. Of course, that wasn't true for many, many years, right? But I made very conscious choices along the road. My mother was amazing, but I didn't want her life.
Mm.
Yeah, and by the way, she came a long way too. She had a cleaning lady also as she got older. And not that there's anything wrong with that. Not that there's anything wrong with doing that stuff. So there's that aspect. The other thing is it's probably not politically correct anymore, but I was a tomboy. Yep. And I always worked out. I always loved sports. I work out every day and I love it. And that's probably the biggest way where I take care of myself. I rejuvenate. It's a stress reliever, always has been. I love to read. I will read everything and anything. I'm just getting into podcasts, like if I'll go for a walk at night just to get my butt off this chair that I'm in all day. But I'll get up early. I'll go work out. I love time with my family. I love time with my friends. And, people say, oh, you love everybody. You'll say you have to meet this person. I'm like, not true at all. Because if I meet you and you're an asshole, I'll be nice to you, but then you're gone from my life. So it's easy, right?
It's interesting. It's interesting because I think everyone would be that way, but there's barriers to that as well, isn't there? I think maybe that's where maybe self-esteem can come into play, or knowing yourself, being fully self-aware. That's an interesting one. I think there's also maybe in the UK, we're not great at kind of prioritizing self-care in any way, shape, or form.
Really? Really? You guys aren't into that?
It's more so a fact that I think generationally, certainly, you kind of been bred to believe that self-care is selfish, and therefore that when you get gifted some time, or when you get the opportunity like you to actually create this ecosystem which supports you and helps you to thrive, actually you feel guilty that you should be doing something else for somebody else. Or there's very much kind of that attitude of, it's amazing really if people get gifted amount of time that they don't actually know how they recharge or how they recover or what would be good for them. They're so busy doing and firefighting and doing what they have to.
I'll be okay. So let me go back a little bit. There was a time, especially when my children were very young, when I initially would feel guilty being at work and not being with them, and then I'd be with them and I'm not at work, right? And then I realized that is so ridiculous. Like, so what I tell, and I say this to women all the time, when you are at work, be fully at work. Be at work. Don't worry about where you're not. It serves no purpose. And when you are home and with your family, be fully with your family, because worrying does nothing. All it does is diminish your presence with where you are at the moment, right? And so when I was younger, though, and I had my children younger, this is a little crazy. I would get up at 4:15 in the morning to go to the gym and to be back. So I would not take time away from my family. But I was very sleep deprived for all those years, so I wouldn't recommend that. So I could, I've always prioritized my care, but sometimes I think I had too much sleep deprivation for the benefit. So, but what people, if the UK listeners are listening, then just remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. So, and the other thing is there's a healthy degree of selfishness. Like, let's talk about the word narcissism. Narcissism gets a bad rap, and the way we use it, it's not a good thing. But there's healthy narcissism. For example, I got up this morning, I worked out, I showered, I blow dried my hair because I knew I'd be on this podcast. I used to put a lot of makeup on. Now COVID took care of that. Sorry, folks, I ain't getting the makeup anymore. And I wanted to look presentable, so I don't have a t-shirt on. That's healthy narcissism, right? Self-care is the same thing. If you're stressed out and you're a lunatic and you're yelling at everybody after a hard day at work, you might do yourself a little bit, do yourself better and your kids better and your family better and your relationships better if you took some time for yourself to recharge.
And
you're not doing anybody any favors.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that how you protect yourself? Because you spend your life as people helping other people through their challenges, their adversities, navigating life and business and executive life, professional life. I guess, is it that mentality which stops you bringing all of that home with you, that you have that kind of boundary up in the same way?
Yeah. And I'll tell you what I used to do when my kids were little, back in the day when I used to go to an office, right? Now everything's remote, right? And my kids could tell you this. I would walk into the house and they come running up. There are 4 of them, all close in age. Mommy, good, bad, and ugly, right? The dog is barking or throwing up, who the hell knows, right? So it's chaos, like you're walking into chaos. They're kids. So I would, and they could tell you this, I would say to them, just a minute, let me go upstairs. Let me get changed. I have to go to the bathroom. I'll come back down. Now, at the time, I wasn't aware. But what I was doing is I was transitioning from professional to mommy. I would literally go up the stairs. The process of changing my clothes, going from, I always dress very professional, looking like a total slob, like a total. People, when I would go, I'd go to my kids' games. They'd always know where I was coming from. Like I was at a baseball game, little sidebar. And this woman said to me, "Did you just come from work?" I'm like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" She goes, "Well, I didn't think you wore pearls all day long in the house." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, you're right." Right. And sometimes I'd get changed in the car, but I think so that routine, have a routine. I'd go upstairs, change my clothes, go to the bathroom, come back down. Now I'm mommy. Now it's like, okay, bring it on. Didn't take a lot of time, but I needed that transition. Fantastic. So have some kind of a routine.
Fantastic. Love that. Love this conversation. I mean, I'm sure everybody
great.
As much as I have. But the question I have to ask you before I let you go back into the wilds of wherever you come from in the US is I'm now the MC of the O2 Arena in London. 20,000 people have paid their hard-earned money to come and hear you speak. You sat back in the green room, you hear me call your name, and your walk-on music kicks in, that song that motivates you, that lifts you, that gets you at peak state. Dr. Patty-Ann, what would your walk-on music be and why?
Ain't no stopping us now. Do I have to say why?
Yeah, why not?
That's it.
Excuse
me, believe me, I've never been offered a singing contract.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a whole different rabbit hole to get. I love I'm a big fan of country music, but I can't sing for toffee. That's the problem. My mum says I can, but so does everybody's, right? But yeah, we speak. We don't sing.
Yeah, no, my mom wasn't like that. She was a Brooklyn mom. She's like, shut your mouth.
I love that. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for being such a great guest, Dr. Patty-Ann. I really appreciate your time, as does everybody else. So if you want to connect, and I'm sure Dr. Patty-Ann would love to hear from you, any connections, any questions, check out her podcast. All the links you'll ever need for her are in the bio right here, right now. So do check that out. And from me to you, big round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And don't forget, subscribe to my podcast, Dr. Patty-Ann's podcast, on YouTube. And if you go to my website, everything's drpatty-ann.com. I have a free report on body language.
You heard it here. Do that.
There you go. All right. Be well.
To everybody else, please stay tuned, hit subscribe and like and all that jazz. You know I'm not a details guy. Whatever it takes to get you back here next Monday, do that thing. And I look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, take care, be well, be happy, take care. Cheers, guys. Bye.